Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down a huge pattern change that is coming to the United States early this week, and this is actually going to bring the potential for record-breaking low temperatures in parts of the United States. This is all due to a cold blast that is coming out of Canada that is going to usher in a lot of colder air from the Midwest and even the Ohio Valley back into the Southeast United States and parts of the Southern Plains. We'll also be breaking down a very large storm that is possible next weekend that could be our next significant severe weather event. I'll be giving you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this forecast, and let's begin first with what's happening right now in the United States today that'll lead to this large cold blast. And we're going to begin with the northern plains in the Midwest, and this is the area that is dealing with that cold blast and even a little bit of snow, by the way. A low pressure system is currently centered back over in parts of southern Canada just north of New York, and this is actually spinning some strong northerly winds out of Canada. That's where all that cold air is going to be coming from, is areas in Canada. And as those winds come out of the north, we're also going to see a little bit of lake effect snow today. But the biggest event out of this when it comes to snow is primarily going to be centered across this area that you see here in green and orange, and that would represent the cloud cover here in those areas being a little bit taller with those clouds, meaning that we're actually seeing a little bit more of light to moderate snow in parts of very far northern New England. But with that being said, we are going to look for some snow flurries this afternoon across areas in like Wisconsin, for example, and as well as the Great Lakes region. And eventually, as this low pressure system moves a little bit further down to the south and east, we are eventually going to actually get the potential for very cold weather as far south as areas like the southeast, including Georgia, Alabama, even Florida, where there will be a potential for record-breaking low temperatures by Tuesday morning. We'll be breaking this down for you, by the way, in detail here in just a couple of minutes. Also, further down to the south, we do have a large area of convection. Look, even notice some dark red in there, and that's representing some very high cloud tops aloft, meaning that there are some thunderstorms happening down there right now, and those are going to continue to move right along the Gulf Coast throughout the day today, leading to some isolated severe weather between now and this afternoon. So be mindful of that if you're right there along the Gulf Coast. Obviously, I know a lot of people on spring break. There's definitely going to be some plans down there, so just be mindful of some thunderstorms there. Also, we still have our upper level low that is spinning over in areas like Arizona and as well as New Mexico. This particular low pressure system has been bringing tons of moisture out of the Pacific Ocean, but that is beginning to wind down pretty quickly as that disturbance begins to weaken out over the next few days. All right, let's talk more about the weather pattern that's going to be impacting the United States over the next several days, and also talk about that large storm that is likely going to be impacting the United States next weekend. But we're first going to talk more about what's going to be coming with this record-breaking low temperature potential going into both Monday and Tuesday, and we're going to look at the jet stream to check this out. This gives you an idea of the weather patterns that are happening across the United States. And as I just mentioned a second ago, we have that upper level low that is back over in Arizona. We also have a large low pressure system back over in Canada, and that one's going to be responsible for the cold blast as we go into early next week. So as we go into Monday and as well as Tuesday, notice that low pressure system, and here's your trough access, by the way. That low pressure system will usher in colder air across, again, the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and as well as the Southeast and parts of the Southern Plains. Notice we have a very interesting weather setup over here on the West Coast. Now, this isn't really going to be too big of a deal for our weather pattern, other than it's going to be really dry for the most part across the West Coast throughout the really majority of this upcoming week. High pressure off to the north of this low pressure system. It's going to get, again, pretty interesting with this sort of setup. This low pressure system is actually going to try to continue to backtrack to the west all the way through Tuesday before it begins to race off to the east. But while that's all happening, that low pressure system will continue to bring cold air to the east coast of the country by Tuesday. Once we go into Wednesday and Thursday, that low pressure system finally will eject over the southern tier across areas primarily in the southwest of the Four Corner states. That actually will lead to the potential for some very isolated severe weather on Thursday across areas in like Texas, for example, perhaps Louisiana. By the time we go into Friday, things really quiet across much of the United States, but that'll all change as we go into the later half of next weekend, because the European model in particular and even the GFS model indicating a large-scale storm will likely develop as we go into next Sunday or Monday, and this will be something to watch for as we get closer to the tail end of the month. Computer models are really hinting at something large, perhaps a pretty large severe weather event, maybe even some snow out of this. Really uncertain what exactly will happen with this, because we are still talking about an event that's 7 days out, but I'm going to talk about more in detail about the future radar and show you what might happen in just a few minutes, so make sure you stay tuned. But let's talk more about the temperature trends here over the next few days in terms of who's going to get really cold weather and who's going to drop below freezing, and a really rare below freezing event for some parts of the southeast. Here's what the temperature anomalies look like going into Sunday into Monday. Notice this large cold air mass building across areas in the northern plains and the Midwest, and this is all going to move down to the south as we go into Sunday into Monday. Notice that really large cold air mass moving into Missouri, eventually even into the southern plains. Now, areas like Texas, not really going to get a whole lot of this. Instead, it's actually going to be relatively close to average back down in Texas, but comparatively to Arkansas is actually going to be dealing with some pretty cold weather for this time of the year. Many areas could drop below freezing. Once we go into Tuesday morning, that cold air mass moves to the east coast and across areas in the northern and central plains. That warm air will arrive again. Once we go into late Tuesday into Wednesday, cold air mass starts to fizzle out, and we'll actually have another one building as we go into the later half of this upcoming week. That will mainly be impacting areas in the Midwest and the northern plains, and as well as the Northeast. Overall, not looking at really any record-breaking weather potential out of that particular disturbance, but that'll be something to watch for if you're back up those areas. Below average temperatures will return. Many of you will have to pull the jackets right back out of the closet as we go into the later half of the week. So what will the actual temperatures be? Well, let's begin with today's high temperatures. Notice across the south and east parts of the United States, areas even up into Maryland are in the 60s and 70s, which is pretty crazy for this time of the year. Even though we're in mid-March, it's still quite warm. Once we go into tomorrow morning, temperatures dropping below freezing pretty far down to the south. Now, this isn't super unusual for this time of the year. Obviously, many areas still have below freezing temperatures, even in Kentucky and Tennessee. But what's a bit more unusual is once we go into Tuesday morning, things are going to be way colder and way further down to the south. Now, our freezing line is going to drop all the way down in parts of central Georgia, central Mississippi, and even a large chunk of Arkansas will drop below freezing as we go into Tuesday morning. Now, a lot of this will not be record-breaking cold, but some areas will, especially back down into northern Georgia, perhaps even eastern Tennessee, very close to record-breaking low temperatures with many areas 20 degrees below average going into Tuesday morning. So be very mindful of that. Again, it's a bit rare for this time of the year to have a freezing temperature line this far down to the south, especially in mid-March, even in Georgia and Alabama. I don't think this will drop into Florida, by the way. It's a very, very, very low chance. I think most areas will be in the mid to upper 30s and low 40s, even in the Florida Panhandle, which is good news because I know there's a lot of vegetation already planted there. And then once we go into Wednesday morning, that cold air will start to move back up to the north, and below freezing temperatures will not really be much in the talk across areas in the southeast. All that cold air will go right back up to the north where it came from, especially for this time of the year. In terms of wind chills Monday morning, by the way, it's going to get very cold for some areas in the Midwest. You will need a winter jacket. Wind chills dropping into the single digits. A few areas in northeast Minnesota will even drop below zero, and then back over in areas like Canada. Notice there will be some areas with wind chills 30 to 40 degrees below zero. Good thing we're not dealing with that, by the way, here in the United States. I would not want to be dealing with that right now, especially in March, as spring is about to begin only in a few days, by the way. All right, let's talk a little bit more about that large storm that is coming to the United States this upcoming weekend. It's a possibility. It's not guaranteed, but I do want to show you what this might look like. This is what we're talking about going into Tuesday into Wednesday. Notice most of the country staying relatively dry. Isolated severe weather threat Wednesday into Thursday, perhaps across the southern plains. Again, I'm not overly confident we're going to be talking about any sort of severe weather outbreak. I think overall it's a really low risk of severe weather. Maybe a little bit of snow as we go into Thursday night into Friday across the Midwest. That might be something to watch for, but what we're really going to have to watch for is going into late Friday into Saturday, once that low pressure system begins to eject out of the Pacific Ocean over the Rocky Mountains and eventually into the Great Plains, because the European model shows a really strong and large scale storm across a large chunk of the Great Plains. Now, I do want to mention again, this is still 7 to 10 days out, meaning that there are a lot of things that will change between now and then, especially with this ice and snow event that it's showing right now. But one thing we do need to pay attention to is the severe weather potential as we go into the later half of March. Obviously, severe weather season begins to ramp up, and with our transition to El Nino into La Nina, severe weather actually becomes more likely in areas like the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, even in March, but more than anything, more closer to the late spring into the summer. But it is something we still need to monitor for. And then once we go into Monday into Tuesday, again, things relatively uncertain, but it would likely be a multi-day severe weather event that begins in the Great Plains, eventually moves into the Ohio Valley and the Midwest, and then eventually maybe even into the Southeast, and perhaps by Tuesday it will move into the East Coast. But again, things still remain very uncertain with this. Make sure you stay tuned. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We'll be keeping you posted with the latest as new information comes in about this particular storm. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.